Good afternoon, and welcome to today's webcast brought to you by Compliance Week. I'm Matt Kelly, editor of Compliance Week, and I'll be hosting our session today. Today we're going to be talking about the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, specifically FCPA compliance auditing using the IDEA data analysis software. Before we hear from our guests, let me quickly go over the agenda for this afternoon. We're scheduled to go for 1 hour. I'm going to give a very brief introduction here, and then we'll jump right into our presentation, which is sponsored by Automation Services. They are the U.S. distributor of Caseware IDEA. That presentation will then be followed by a question and answer session. Your questions will be kept confidential and anonymous, so please don't be shy and feel free to ask whatever might be on your mind. You can ask questions at any time using the Ask a Question function on the left-hand side of your screen, and I'll pose them to our guests at the end of their presentation. After the Q&A, I will then do a wrap-up and we can be on our way. This webcast will offer CPE credit for all attendees. To get CPE credit, please disable your pop-up blockers in your web browser in order to get access to the exam. To obtain the CPE credit, wait until this webcast is completely over and I sign off. At that point, the final exam will present itself automatically in a separate window on your computer screen, and you can take it. And again, please ensure that your pop-up blockers are disabled or else you may run into trouble. If you do have any trouble viewing the CPE test or receiving the CPE certificate afterwards, please send an email to info@complianceweek.com to request a copy, and we will get one out to you. And by the way, I will repeat these instructions at the end of the webcast, so if you missed anything, no worry, just stay tuned. A few other administrative details. At any time during this presentation, listeners can download the slides from the drop-down menu on the left-hand side of your screen. You can also hit the View Slide Full Screen button at the bottom of your screen if you want to increase the slide size. And lastly, a Help button is on the upper right-hand corner of your screen if you do need any assistance. So today's webcast is part of a series that we launched years ago here at Compliance Week. We hold these webcasts just about every week, usually on Thursdays, right around this hour. And our guests have been chief compliance and governance officers at leading public companies and experts on various compliance, regulatory, and audit and risk topics. I'm not going to read the upcoming schedule of webcasts, but you can visit www.complianceweek.com for details or to register for any of these, which, by the way, are free of charge. So let's get on with our program for today. We have two guests. First is Jennifer Ellison. Jennifer is the Legal Compliance Manager at Baker Hughes, and Jennifer brings more than 17 years of experience to her role as Legal Compliance Manager at Baker Hughes, where she provides counsel and assesses risks to meet corporate compliance requirements and works to prevent operational losses. Her background includes expiring managing corporate investigations, developing the code of conduct and conflict of interest policies, and conducting ethics training for managers. Her experience also includes proactive fraud testing using data analysis, improving internal controls, and conducting risk assessments. Joining Jennifer also is Marianne Ibrahim. She is Senior Counsel for Audits and Investigations at Baker Hughes as well. Marianne leads selected anti-bribery and FCPA compliance efforts at Baker Hughes. That might involve audits of foreign subsidiaries, joint ventures, commercial sales representatives, and high-risk and emerging markets. She does FCPA risk analysis and compliance due diligence on M&A targets. And she also manages the global investigative database and conducts compliance-related investigations for Baker Hughes. And then lastly, she assists the Chief Compliance Officer in the developing and implementing and monitoring of compliance efforts, and that would include policy, controls, communications matters, and whatnot. So we're happy to have both of them here, and they should give a very good analysis of how Baker Hughes is trying to solve these problems of FCPA compliance and audits. Jennifer, I believe you are going to get us started.
Yes, thank you, Matt, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jennifer. I'm here with Marianne, who's counsel. I'm basically the forensic audit manager, so I just want to explain, first of all, that I'm not legal counsel. So Marianne and I are going to tag team a bit during the presentation. We're going to talk today about the types and purpose of FCPA audits. Marianne's going to talk about planning and interviewing. I'm going to talk about our FCPA program as well as transactional data analysis. And then Marianne's going to talk about closing and reporting. So I'm going to turn it over to Marianne for a second to talk about the types of FCPA audits.
Hello, everyone. So there's, we're going to switch the slide. Okay, there's 4 types of FCPA audits that our company conducts. Your company may conduct 1 or more of these. We put M&A due diligence reviews, pre-acquisition reviews as part of this because some of the concepts we're going to talk about apply to those types of reviews. We also conduct M&A post-acquisition reviews or audits of our targets because once they are under our responsibility, under our books and records, we want to make sure that they're complying with all of our policies. Next, internal FCPA audits of our business units. Those are typically located in high-risk countries or emerging markets. And then finally, audits of third-party agents and business partners, our intermediary audits, and those are quite important considering that 75% of FCPA enforcement actions involve intermediaries. Next slide. The purpose of FCPA audits, this slide really is what are you auditing and why? And the goal of our audits is to identify the key points of government interaction and try to make sure we have visibility to those points of interaction. So they can be direct or indirect. For direct, I'm sure all of you are familiar with these items, customs and duties. So those usually involve the logistics function, corporate taxes, any type of statutory payments and penalties, who's making those payments, how those payments are being made, are they documented, Social Security, visas and work permits, immigration type issues, public official gifts and entertainment, any type of expenses related to public officials or state-owned entities or national oil companies, including trainings and travel, et cetera, meals. And next, business licenses and permits, any type of permitting licenses, whether that involves real estate or access to sites or anything like that. And then there's indirect, so custom agents and freight forwarders, your third-party logistics agents, visa processors, commercial sales agents, intermediaries, distributors, consultants, channel partners. We didn't list all the possible names that companies can refer to a third-party intermediary, but you get the message. Next is audit planning. So for audit planning, we conduct robust desk audit planning before we actually go to the field or the ground, and we start about a month or 6 weeks in advance. We have legal counsel lead it for privilege and other reasons, but legal counsel works quite closely with forensic audit. Then we establish our key business contacts. Those contacts are going to be who we communicate results to and who can help shed light on some of our findings. We prepare initial document request lists for financial information queries. That's key to our audit, and Jennifer's going to be discussing that later. That's pretty robust, and we submit that whether it's depending on who the audit or what type of audit is. If it's a M&A due diligence type of audit, you know the potential target. If it's an intermediary audit to the intermediary, et cetera. Okay, next, review findings from previous audits. Okay, the next 3 items actually are key to making sure that our audit, we've refined and enhanced the focus of our audit. So these really help us understand what we're looking for. Reviewing findings from previous audits, reviewing internal investigation, closed and open matters, code of conduct, affirmative responses. Hopefully your company is conducting that code of conduct, gathering those responses and understanding regarding the specific entity that you're auditing, what sort of patterns exist there, and making sure your audit is addressing that, and researching related DOJ and SEC enforcements in your industry or in the country that you're auditing. I'll turn it over to Jennifer.
So I want to talk for a few minutes about the data requests that we send, specifically if we're going to be able to get some data files. Again, the data requests, like Marianne was saying, it's going to be different for every type of audit that you're using, that you're conducting. If you're conducting an audit of an internal business or post-acquisition due diligence, you should have carte blanche for everything and be able to get data files. If you're doing a Pre-acquisition due diligence, you might not get that much, and if you're auditing a third party, whether it's a high-risk vendor or an agent, you might be limited as to what they give you or what they want to give you electronically. So all these things that we're talking today about have to be catered a bit to your industry and your type of profession. These are the basic things that we ask for, and we ask for these in a data format, not a PDF format. IDEA can import from PDF, but we don't want to take all that extra time to have to import everything. We want to ask for it in a flat file format or a database format and an Excel format. We ask for the trial balance. We ask for a chart of accounts, journal entry line items, financial and compliance policies, audited financial statements, bank reconciliations and statements. And the reason that we want to see these things is because we want to be able to determine whether they have a robust system of internal controls. We ask for a list of agents or intermediaries, sales reps, those types of things. And we also, especially for M&A pre-acquisition due diligence, we ask for revenue by country and customer because we want to see what type of countries they are doing business in, what kind of issues are in those countries, and if they have any government-owned entities as customers. So in our industry, we want to identify if we have any which national oil companies we have. The next thing that Marianne's going to talk about are the FCPA audit interviews. So that's a good transition to this slide. Depending on the types of information we receive, we review that information and make sure to incorporate in our interviews. First, when you're selecting interviewers for your company, you really should make sure that you're selecting culturally sensitive, patient type of counsel that they're willing to put their ego aside, have good dialogue, they're amiable, and have good dialogue with any type of employee and with any type of background, and able to communicate clearly and properly. The focus is it's not an internal investigation, it's an audit, and I see a lot of counsel and interviewers get confused with this, and the focus is really to create dialogue. An example of this, one company refuses to call these interviews, they call them discussions, and I think that's probably a more appropriate term for the dialogue that is occurring. So once you've selected your interviewers, you select your interviewees, we create an interview list before we go into the field and we send that out. Not too far in advance. We don't want people to be overly prepared or canned in their discussions. But these are the types of people that we select for interviews. Obviously, business leadership. If we're going into a country, we want the country manager and his direct reports typically. Sales, marketing, business development. We want to know the techniques and tools they use to obtain business. Those are some key people that we always interview. Operations, your day-to-day, on-the-ground people that may be interacting with the police or any type of on-the-ground regulators. Logistics, obviously, for customs interactions, and then your corporate functions. HR may be interacting with the Labor Department, finance. We always interview several finance folks regarding statutory books, payroll, tax, etc. HS&E, they typically have interaction with the environmental departments, real estate, and legal. So next slide. Topics and techniques. Again, we want to emphasize the focus is this is an audit focus. It's exploratory. It's not an investigation. If by chance something does come up that needs to that looks like it should be extracted as an investigation, that's exactly what we do. We extract it out of the audit and conduct a separate internal investigation. So topics and techniques, we address policies and procedures of the company. If it's for a third party that we're interviewing, we want to make sure the third party understands our company's policies and procedures and are abiding by them. Books and records pertaining to FCPA risks, and Jennifer's going to talk about those areas in a bit.
We try to test their knowledge of FCPA and UK Bribery Act. If they understand that the differences between what a facilitating payment is and what an extortion payment is and what our company prohibits and allows, et cetera. And that's really so that we make sure that our employees are able to properly identify and report such matters to us, and that our third parties have been properly trained as they are required to annually. Regulatory challenges, we ask a ton of questions around regulatory challenges because in some countries, some regulatory departments tend to be overzealous or they have a reputation of levying fines or taxes often, and we want to understand those dynamics and how we're handling those, and if those individuals have the proper support in handling them. Other compliance areas are obvious trade, anti-boycott, anti-money laundering, antitrust. And again, your responses from your code of conduct affirmative answers and investigations can help tailor some of these questions in our interviews. And then the last one, conduct FCPA training. That doesn't occur in the interviews. That typically occurs in the opening meeting, and we address that before we conduct our interviews. And typically we have most of the interviewees and the key people in the opening meeting, and we conduct live training. And next is the FCPA audit program, and I'm going to pass that to Jennifer.
Right, so I'm going to start talking about our FCPA audit program, and the first slide that we have that I'm going to advance to are the GL accounts, the general ledger accounts that we look at, that we focus on. So when we do our interviews, the audit team, the accountants, auditors, and the counsel do the first couple of interviews together. So the opening meeting that we have, that counsel leads, and we do the FCPA training. The second interview that we like to do is with the finance director or the CFO, because this helps everyone. It helps the internal auditors or the forensic auditors get off to a quick start. So we usually like to go through a lot of the things that we're going to talk about with the CFO or the accounting director first. And then as soon as we finish with that, we get a pretty good overview of their general controls and their financial statements, and then we tend to split up. So the auditors will split up. We'll follow the CFO or the accounting director back to accounting and set up shop there for a couple of days. And then the counsel will stay in the conference room separately and start their series of interviews for the next couple of days. So we do this, the first thing that we do is we focus on these GL accounts. And again, this is specific to our industry and our profession, but it's important to interview as part of planning your business personnel, as including the local sponsor, the local country management, and the local accounting, to talk about what else might be a part of your planning, what other GL accounts you might want to focus on that might be more specific to your country. So we always want to take a look at commission, facilitating payments, any accounts on the chart of accounts that indicate any of these types of things, training, charitable gifts. I'm going to jump down toward the bottom to community contributions and social responsibility payments. This is where you really want to understand your country that you're in, because some countries have more local content requirements, and we know we're really there helping to build the communities as we're building wells. And then some countries who won't have any of these kinds of things. So you have to adapt it to where you are. So we want to focus on GL accounts with these types of names, but you always want to keep a lookout for GL accounts, for general ledger accounts that have the words miscellaneous or expediting or other payments and other types of sort of miscellaneous or vague names. So we do review the full account. And we're going to go through this a little bit later when we talk specifically about IDEA and transactional data analysis. So I'm going to switch to the next slide to go over the basic components of our FCPA audit program. So like I said, my team and Marianne's team interview the finance and accounting director first. And we go through their bank accounts, cash disbursement controls, but basically we're going through all of their overall accounting policies and their payment controls, which is sort of a foundational accounting concept. And what we want to do is ensure that their accounting department is professional and that they have written documents and policies, and we want to sort of get a grasp of their policies and how they're set up. So we We review their bank accounts. We want to take a look that they're not offshore. We go through and see how they're coded. We go through their authorization limits, because we also want to take a look at transactions that are just below authorization limits. We look at cash funds, and we specifically focus on cash, petty cash, and any types of government payments that are paid through cash. So we spend a lot of time on those, as well as looking for taking specific samples from the GL accounts. We also take samples from the bank statements and to see where those fall as well, and to make sure that they're coded properly and to see what those are. The next slide, we focus, as probably many of you can imagine, on travel, entertainment, and gifts to see how our employees or our sales representatives are entertaining, what kind of gifts they're providing. And again, the gifts and the entertainment vary from country to country as to what's expected and what's reasonable. And Marianne, did you have a comment about the gifts and entertainment?
You're going to need to understand the cultural sensitivities, and this is going to vary from country to country. Some cultures expect a lot more entertainment than others, and it's up to the audit team to try to evaluate what is reasonable and proper for the country and the industry. And we are always on the conservative side. Regardless of if something is acceptable in the culture or the industry, we try to be a little more conservative than that, and I think that's the proper approach.
Thanks. Someone just asked a question that I'll answer quickly about ensuring that our population is complete. We reconcile to the trial balance. If they give us a list of the travel entertainment gifts, we expect that total to match the trial balance. So we do the best we can. As well, we don't just look at things, just look at employee expenses. We look at things that are in the GL account for travel and entertainment that might have been paid on a purchase order, or might have been paid through accounts payable, as opposed to just employee T&E. So I hope that answers your question. The next thing is that we look at payroll to try to do the best we can to see, and we also conduct interviews as to whether there are any government officials or anyone related to a government official on the payroll. The next slide, for donations and contributions, again, I know we keep saying this over and over, but it's important to do your research before you go to these countries, because different countries, because the donations and contributions are very different. There are a lot of countries that don't have political contributions because they're monarchies or dictatorships, or there's only one party, so they don't get the concept, but they just don't do political contributions. And then Marianne's got an example of something that she came across for charity donations as well.
There's always ask if you don't understand a term on, especially your intermediaries or third-party agents' books and records. There was a term in the Middle East that we came across called zakat, Z-A-K-A-T, and then we learned that was an Islamic charitable donation, and we requested the records regarding that because typically we request all charitable types of donations or a sampling of those donations to review. So if there's a term on the trial balance or chart accounts that you don't understand, make sure you get it translated or ask questions about it.
The next item is training. It's important to determine during the planning process whether your business provides training to national oil companies or other government-owned entities. We come across a lot of companies. We do business in a lot of countries that have local content requirements, and as part of our contract, we have to train local employees. So it's important to do that, to take a look at those, to ensure that there's a proper agenda, and to take a look at the travel involved in that as well, and to review those types of things. Payments under local law. You're always going to have business license fees and other fees that we have, and Marianne's going to talk specifically about some of the things that are in the oil and gas business that we've come across.
Well, I'll keep it short. There's one example, for instance, that we have in our company. It's a product line called Wireline, and it involves explosives and radioactive materials. And as you can imagine, there's a plethora of regulatory regulations and things that we have to comply with, permitting and licenses and military escorts, et cetera. And so the key here to note is to make sure that you have, especially if you have outside counsel or external auditors conducting your audits for you, make sure you're doing yourself a disservice if you don't have someone internally accompanying them on the audit and informing them of the intricacies of your business and where those risks lie. And so it obviously is very industry and company specific.
Right, and the last thing that is on our audit program are the payments made to the third party. We review these payments as a standard procedure throughout the year in our department, but during the audits of our third-party agents, we specifically audit and trace through the payments that we make to them to ensure that they're going to the bank account, that a local bank account, they're not offshore, and that they're coding them correctly. During our audits we can't really do this, of course, in pre-acquisition due diligence, but we also look at these types of audits when internal audit performs FCPA audits of our business units to make sure that all the payments that we make to an agent, whether they're a processing agent or a commercial sales agent, that those are being paid according to our policies. I think we might have mentioned this a couple of times. I think one of the most important things about our audit program and our audit process is the communication that we have with our attorneys. It's not only do we stop at the end of every day to talk, but anytime something comes up during the interviews, the counsel passes that on to us so that we can add words or we can add GL accounts or add issues to what we're going to look at, things to our sample. And anytime that we find something while we're auditing, we IM or text or walk in and pass that back to the attorney so that they can use that information and clarify things during their interviews. So we have a really great team, great communication. So the next 15 minutes, I'm going to spend talking about IDEA and talking about transactional data analysis. I'm going to skip to the next slide. I keep behind on those. I can't emphasize enough how important it is to use a risk-based approach. And I know you hear people talk about that all the time, but I want to try to give you some practical examples of how this works. The overall structure of the way that we do this is that we download GL line items, including payments, expense reports, things like that, and then we perform 5 to 10 to 15 individual tests that I'm going to go through a few of those. And then what we want to do is identify the transactions that hit a lot of those tests. You'll get much better results, and you'll be looking at much more high-risk transactions when you do this, as opposed to doing random sampling. So, so we want to identify journal entries that hit multiple risk factors. So here are a couple of the individual tests that we perform. And you'll notice as you look at these that a lot of these are very similar in the exact same test that you would do for proactive fraud. And they are very similar because we're looking for hidden payments. We're looking for inappropriate payments that someone made that they're going to try to hide in one of these accounts. And a lot of people are teaching now that any type of FCPA improper payment is a fraud. Because it's illegal, first of all, and they always try to hide it. No one ever has a GL account for bribery. And so you'll see a lot of similarities in these tests. So number one, we want to run a test to look at all manual payments. We want to see when someone's manually paying out of a bank account or manually wrote a check or is paying cash instead of going through the regular accounts payable process. We look at duplicates, round dollar. I would be careful. Dollar is not really the right word. Round currency payments. There are some currencies in Nigeria, Vietnam, Indonesia where you're always going to have a round dollar or a round currency payment because they don't have decimals or they don't have cents. So just be careful about these. We run a test for compliance-sensitive words, and we're specifically going to go over that. Compliance-sensitive GL accounts, we're specifically going to go over that. We want to look at general ledger accounts that bypass accounts payable. And this is where someone did, for you accountants out there, I'm sorry that this is probably a very mixed crowd of accountants and non-accountants, but we definitely want to look at transactions that are a credit cash debit expense, meaning that someone just took an entry straight from the bank account and went straight to an expense account and bypassed accounts payable. We want to take a look at any vendors or run a test against OFAC and other trade compliance databases. If you're not already doing that as a part of your legal compliance processes, We want to take a look at payments that are just under authorization limits, and those, of course, come from the interviews, as well as offshore bank accounts. We're specifically going to cover offshore bank accounts. So this is the ugliest slide that I have, but I'm going to take a couple of minutes to explain it. I always start these audits, my number one motto is to begin with the end in mind. So I want to show you what the final project is going to look at so you kind of understand what you have to do to get it to where you want to be. If you look at number one, on the right, you'll see this is an idea screen with a couple of different pop-ups. On the right, you'll see the file list, and I've already performed certain tests. A is split invoices, B, disbursements below an approval limit, C, duplicates. You get down to G and H from manual entries and payment blocks. So I will have already done, these are 8 tests that I did. In IDEA, you append them together. There's no programming required in IDEA, which is terrific. You don't have to be a techie to do this. The great thing about IDEA and why it's so important for us to use IDEA in legal compliance is because you can't screw up the data, as if you can't drop something on your keyboard and mess up your Excel spreadsheet. IDEA keeps a full history of everything that you did to the data file, so it's the data integrity is terrific, and if anything ever comes up from counsel during litigation of how you got your numbers, you can always go back and show them exactly what formulas you use, and it just keeps a terrific history, which is really important to us. Again, you don't have to be a programmer to use this. So you would basically take all of your results, A through H, add them up together, and combine the files together, which is called append, and summarize them. So let's say you don't have IDEA, and you just have Excel. You could still use this to combine a database and use a VLOOKUP and use your VLOOKUP on journal ID. So if you go to number 2, which is on the right, this shows different journal IDs that are hitting a lot of different tests. The top 3 hit 7 different tests, and the one that's highlighted specifically hits 6 tests. And because of the way that IDEA links these up, all I have to do is click on that one that I highlighted, and you'll see box number 3. It shows me a list of all the tests that this one journal entry hit. And those are the ones that we want to focus on because those have the possibility of being higher risk as opposed to random sampling, which is really against my religion in every way. So all the data that I'm going to show you is demo data only. It does not represent Baker Hughes data at all. So let's go to the next slide for a second. We're going to talk about analyzing the chart of accounts. If you're able to get a chart of accounts in Excel and you upload it into IDEA, we use a multi-state field to create a field that has an empty box, like a checkbox in it. So in the middle of the screen, you'll see a field manipulation field. This is where you go in to add extra fields. So once you import your data, it's stable, it's unchangeable. And if you want to change any of the data, you can't really change the data in the fields. You have to add another field. So we added a multi-state field, and on the left, you'll see that there are different parameters you can put in. You don't have to write an equation. If you type a 1 in for the parameter, you're going to get all the fields, all the check boxes are going to be checks, all the boxes. If you type in a 0, they're all going to be X's. A 3, they're going to be question marks. I put in a -1 because I want blank. And then if you see at the bottom, I added this field called FCPA, and then when I go through and look at these GL accounts, I start clicking on GL accounts that are interesting to us. One is a specific example of commissions and sales discounts. We typically look at sales discounts when we're doing distributors, things like that. So this is a really good field that you can use. The next one that we're going to go through is a compliance-sensitive word search. A lot of companies, including us, have a list of words that we want to take a look at when we're reviewing journal entries. My advice is to try to truncate your words as much as possible. So, for instance, you'll see charity. I have charit because this is going to pick up charity or charitable contributions. Consult's going to pick up consulting or consultation, things like that. So I would try to truncate these words as much as possible. And then also, when you go to a foreign country, it's important to ask people in country, or if you have a Big Four firm or an accounting firm that goes with you to provide local language skills, that they also help you with words that are specific to the local country. IDEA has a lot of great automated apps, and one of them is called a looping search. And this looping search is available for purchase on their website. It's only $50. It's really worth the money. It allows you to take your list of words, and then it will ask you to tell it what your journal entry file is, as well as the field that contains all of the text information, the reference text. There's always a text field. And then it will go through all of the journal entries looking for your compliance-sensitive words. And it takes a minute or so to run, and it really saves a lot of time. I've given the website for their automated app. And then the next slide here just shows an example of the results. So in this example, you'll see the journal entry ID, which is our key, which is what we use to identify all the journal entries. And then on the right, you'll see the document detail header text. These are generally examples probably that represent SAP, which is the ERP system that a lot of companies use. And in the document detail text, you'll see that it identified journal entries with the word advance. Line 6 has permit and fees, payments, payment for permit, travel advance. And then you'll see one false positive in here. It's line 12. It says it's an expense entry. It says to attend an advanced soldering course. Advanced isn't really the word that we were looking for, but we were looking for advanced. So you'll always get false positives when you're doing transactional data analysis. Then we also got customs and duties and import licenses. So you can also do this manually in Excel by doing searches and things. It's always worth the time to do this type of thing, whether you pay for it or do it manually. And then the next one is another compliance-sensitive word search is a word list maker. This is it's much more modern concept than the old school way of having your own list. A lot of companies will do manually. I've seen a lot of forensic auditors do this manually. IDEA also has an automated app called the Word List Maker, and what it does is goes through your journal entries in the field that you designate, which is that text field again, and it creates a word list of all the words that were used in your journal entries. And the reason this is important is because it seems like countries and the folks that are committing crimes, whether it's fraud or FCPA, bribery payments, are always using some type of code word to cover up what they're doing. So I went to a compliance event here in Houston a couple of months ago with a Big Four firm, and the latest phrase that they were using, that their clients were using, was pie. Where's my pie? And that's something that they found because they did a word list with whatever product that they had. And then Marianne has some examples, a couple of other examples that are similar to this.
It constantly changes. We've heard bonus and rebate and discount, and some of those are listed on the left. But also, I'm sure y'all are familiar with the Dubai across the sea type, where a company was hiding payments made to Iran. So I think the key here, the key takeaway is you've got to modify your list for your journal entries and for country-specific terms. Jennifer and I went to Malaysia once, and we had outside counsel help us with a list of terms, and she came up with 20 terms that we had no idea. We would have never inserted in our word search, and it was pretty helpful. So that's something just to keep in mind. Make sure to modify your list and constantly update it, because those words are constantly evolving.
Mm-hmm. So I'll go back and answer a question that popped up. As soon as we when we identify journal entries with this compliance-sensitive words, we can extract an idea. And also, when you do a multi-state field, you can right-click and identify all the check marks and extract really quickly. And again, you don't have to do any kind of programming. Someone just asked quickly a question about how easy it is to extract using the multi-state field. Let's move on. Here's the example of the compliance-sensitive word result that the automated app Word List Maker creates. Again, this is demo data. It does not represent Baker Hughes. It's a pretty standard list. So if we were to do journal entries in Nigeria, for instance, it created a word list of all the words that were used in the text. So Nigeria is listed mostly, for the most part, limited, because that's probably the name of the company, international, DHL, customs, duties, visas. Also in the word list maker is that you can designate words that you do not want to use. So you definitely want to take out, for us, we would love to identify the offshore payments, but we would get so many false positives on the word offshore that it almost wouldn't be worth our using that word. So we would take offshore and say we don't want you to identify those words. So it produces a great result, and then you can click on, you can use a multi-state field on this, and you can kind of click on the words that you want to include in your test, and you would make that, again, include that in your compliance-sensitive word test. The next thing that we're going to take a look at is manual entries and payments. We're on SAP as well as on a lot of other companies out there, but it's important to speak with accounting or IT to identify what a manual payment looks like in your system. I've listed some basic SAP tables and T-codes on the left. Sometimes people will use a specific document type or posting key. Some people use a payment method or payment block to identify when the country or the local accounting wants to block a payment and handle it with special care or handle it manually. So it's important to identify those manual entries. Let's see. So the next slide is vendor bank accounts. This is what we do to identify offshore bank accounts. On the left, I have a list of SAP tables. LFA1, LFB1, basic vendor master. LFBK is a vendor master bank account. So if we were going to a country like Malaysia again, we would download all the vendors that are used for that Malaysia entity in LFA1. And then we would also take those vendors and download their bank information out of the table LFBK. And we would compare the country of the vendor to the country of the bank account. So you'll see specifically, this happens to be Australia, I think, that I threw in there, not that high risk, but it could indicate. So on the left, you'll see that the vendor country is Australia. On the right, the bank country is CH, which is Switzerland. And again, this is demo data. It's not Baker Hughes data. So this could indicate high risk. And then the next one is Australia, and the bank account's Papua New Guinea, PG. So that's the simplest way for us to identify offshore bank accounts. And again, you have to think about what your own policy is, whether you allow those or what kind of approvals you have to do offshore bank accounts. So those are some examples of the things that you can do for transactional data analysis. I've used IDEA. I've been using IDEA for about 13 years, and we use that for our transaction data analysis. We would take the results from all these tests, again, vendor bank accounts to show offshore payments, manual payments, compliance-sensitive words. We would combine them all together into one big database and do a summarization. Or you could do a VLOOKUP if you're in Excel to show how many journal entries hit multiple tests and then focus on those. So let's see. That's sort of the end of the transactional testing. And then I'm going to turn it back over to Marianne to talk about closing and reporting.
So I think Jennifer demonstrated well why it's so important to have strong left-brain people on your team. I'm more right-brain, and it's a collaborative relationship for sure. So one point regarding collaboration is we have constant communication. If I don't understand something, or if I want to understand the process of how they obtained a certain result, we communicate on a daily basis regarding that. I communicate my findings, or counsel should communicate their findings in interviews. Key terms will come up in interviews, potential targets for further examination will come up. So we meet every day at the end of each day of the audit while we're on the field to communicate those findings. We also communicate to management as findings occur so that there are no surprises, and typically management will be helpful and part of the solution in helping us shed light or resolve or obtain additional information. Now, if you think management is perhaps there's some malfeasance involved or wrongdoing, of course, it's probably best not to keep them updated or in the loop, and that's a determination you've got to make with counsel. Hold on-site closing meetings. We do this for our third-party agents. We do this for our internal audits, again, so that there are no surprises, and then that any additional requests that remain outstanding, that we address those then. And then we issue a consolidated report, and that's appropriate for the type of audit. We have different types of report for each audit. If it's an internal audit, we're going to have unfettered access, obviously, to our own books and records, and so those reports are much more robust. For our external audits or audits of our intermediaries, those reports remain internal. We'll update our agent or our third-party intermediary on our findings, but we will not share the report with them. And there are, and actually the next slide, we're almost done here. This is the last slide. These are just a list of related websites that we rely on. We consult a number of different websites, so these are some of the key ones. And I would recommend that you become familiar with those.
Thanks. We're going to turn it back over to Matt now. I appreciate you listening, and we're going to turn it back over to Matt now for Q&A and to close out for us.
Sure. Thank you very much. And again, everybody, we are listening to Marianne Ibrahim, and she is the Senior Counsel of Audits and Investigations at Baker Hughes, and her colleague, Jennifer Ellison. She is the Legal Compliance Manager at Baker Hughes. One last reminder here for people, if you want a copy of the slides that Marianne and Jennifer just presented, you can download them from the drop-down menu on the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. Meanwhile, we do have questions here, and so I will put them to you in no particular order. One person writing in asking, can you provide a sense of how many hours, just as a rough estimate, how many hours do you budget for these types of audits?
So according to the different types of audits, this is Jennifer again, I'll answer it. For our internal FCPA audits, the internal auditors spend about 2 weeks, I would say, on those. For our due diligence audits, so those seem to be pretty tight. We get the word that we're thinking about buying something, and we go for about a week on those, maybe a week and a half, because they give us really tight deadlines on those.
But it's working around the clock,
yeah,
really.
And then for our audits of our agents, we only spend 2 to 5 days, according to whether it's a distributor, a joint venture, or a sales agent. You know, we spend 2 to 5 days. But we also spend a week or so off and on planning. So I hope that helps. It's not in terms of hours, really more of weeks.
Somebody else asking a related question, how many interviews do you typically do?
It depends what type of audit it is. So for our internal audit, we'll conduct a minimum of 6 interviews a day, about an hour to an hour and a half each. For our third-party audit of our agents, there's less interviews per day because we try to spend more time per interviewee. That's mostly because our own employees should be more familiar with our policies and have pretty much been through this audit. We have a very robust compliance program, so we're pretty comfortable with our own employees, but we spend a little more time with our intermediaries.
Okay. 1 or 2 questions came in about the apps that you were mentioning. First one, somebody got straight to the point here. How much do these apps cost?
The 2 apps that I talked about cost $50 a piece.
All right.
I can't. I'll have to direct you to the automation services site to take a look at the others.
Okay. And then somebody else asking another question, do you have an audit clause in your third-party contracts?
Yes, we do, and a good suggestion for so basically, yes, but we've had some old agency agreements, either because it's a target that we've acquired that had those agency agreements and we couldn't immediately update those agreements, and so what we do in those instances is have in our annual FCPA certification that we require all of our third parties to sign, we insert an audit clause in that. And so if you have a challenge internally within your company to insert audit clauses in agency agreements because it's bureaucratic or whatever, you still should try for that, but a quick bypass or a quick fix would be to have an annual FCPA certification, and you just insert that and have the third party sign that.
I was curious how often you guys might encounter pushback from, I don't know, either internal employees or third parties or somebody else who aren't thrilled with this clause. Does that happen often?
Internal employees, no. We have policies that they are obligated to cooperate with investigations and audits. But with our third parties, yes, we do, and for a variety of reasons. And we are patient in working with our third party to alleviate any concerns that they have. And typically, we are able, even if the agent or the third party at the front initially will say you absolutely cannot audit. I know that audit clauses here, but we just have too much proprietary information or competitor information. Even in those situations, we've still been successful in being able to access some books and records. And we'll say, okay, what can we see, or can you extract Baker Hughes related items? Can we just look at screenshots? There's a number of things that we do to work with our third parties to make them comfortable so that we, in the end, successfully can have access to their books and records. So the compliance sensitive accounts, not all their books and records.
Can I comment again on what you talked about earlier, that how important it is to have people on the team who are sensitive and who know that it's an audit, not an investigation, and that are familiar with cultural issues and have great communication skills. It's important not to send a lot of suits in that are going to trample on people, that you're sensitive to them and that they understand that they're an audit, and they'll give you so much more information if you work with them and they're less demanding.
Okay.
So, anyway.
Somebody else just asking quickly, what was the term you used for a donation for an Islamic countries? I know one of you mentioned that and highlighted it, and they were just asking, what was that term that you used again?
Sure. It's Zakat, Z-A-K-A-T.
Okay. A different question now, more about the apps and the audits themselves. Can you direct extract items flagged in a multi-state field?
Yes, I might have mentioned that when we were kind of going through that section. As soon as you check all of the, off all of the GL accounts that you want to extract, you can right-click on one of those checks and say, I want to see all the entries with a check mark and extract them. It's really quickly, and again, the great thing about ID is that you don't have to program that. But yes, the answer to the question is yes. You can.
Okay. Somebody else asking, you spent a fair bit of time talking about keyword searches. I imagine that this could create a lot of false positives. Do you have any suggestions for how to limit the number of false positives when you're performing that sort of a search?
Yes. So you're right. You're always going to get false positives. And I showed an example of one where we were looking for travel advance, but we got the word advanced, an advanced soldering course. So what we do is we take a run-through of our first set of test results. Maybe that's 5,000 lines, and we know that's way too much. And we go through and identify that we're picking up a word like offshore for us that we know is just, there's going to be so many false positives we can't use it, or the name of the country, or limited, or the name of our company, things like that. And I think that when you do these types of tests, you have to go through a couple of iterations to get the number down to a more reasonable count. So we start out with 3,000, and then we say, we're going to take out the country name, we're going to take out Baker Hughes, we're going to take out the word offshore, run it again, and go through that a couple of times to pare it down to a more reasonable list.
Okay. Somebody else asking a question here. You had mentioned that Baker Hughes works on an SAP system. Do you have any advice on how to deal with a non-standard SAP environment where a company might use multiple systems or multiple iterations of SAP or something like that?
Well, if you can get the data, first of all, you can ask them to download the data, whatever they have, into a data format like Excel. Then you can use IDEA to join files together, or you can use Excel. It's just important to use whatever you have to do to perform the analysis. So we've come across people who are using Quicken because they're so small, and we've been able to do a reporting extract out of that. Or we have people who use Oracle, or a lot of different enterprise and accounting systems around the world. But most of them have a reporting function. You just do the best you can with whatever system they have to and ask them to extract in the best data format that you can get.
Okay. And I'll sneak in one last question here if we have another minute or so for it. How much detail of observation is included in the final FCPA audit report, and who gets it?
So this is Marianne. We have it depends. In our internal audit reports, it's a lot of detail. It's very technical. Internal audit does a really good job of documenting the technicality. There's root cause. There's why did this occur? Or, what our thoughts are. What are the control failures? What are the recommendations for improvement? It's quite thorough and detailed. For our third-party agents, it's not as detailed. We don't have as much control we don't have as much access to their books and records, first of all, and we don't have as much control in directing the agent and how to manage its books and records. But we do make recommendations. They tend to be more general and more practical, and usually the third party is actually appreciative because we've made suggestions to improve their own visibility to their own books and records.
Okay. Well, that is all the time that we have now for the Q&A, but this has been a very informative session. So again, everybody, our guests were Marianne Ibrahim, and she's the Senior Counsel for Audits and Investigations at Baker Hughes, and Jennifer Ellison, who is the Legal Compliance Manager at Baker Hughes. Marianne and Jennifer, thank you very much.
Thank you, and we just want to say that we see a lot of questions up, and we welcome you contacting us directly if you have any questions. We're happy to answer.
I also want to give a special thanks to our sponsor for this hour, Automation Services, the U.S. distributor of Caseware Idea, for making this webcast possible. This webcast has been recorded, and it will be available in the next hour or so on the Compliance Week archives. CPE credit is now available to Compliance Week subscribers for archive webcasts as well. Please check out our on-demand CPE library under the Webcasts tab at complianceweek.com. For this session here, once again, to obtain your CPE credit after the presentation, wait until I finish momentarily, and then please be sure to disable your pop-up blockers in order to access the exam. I will close this webcast, and then it will automatically close on your computer screen. The final exam will automatically appear on your screen in a separate window, and you can take the test. If you have any trouble viewing the CPE test or receiving the CPE certificate afterwards, please send an email to info@complianceweek.com to request a copy. That concludes this webcast for today. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Matt Kelly, editor of Compliance Week. Have a good day, and goodbye.